Our corporate headquarters, Aqualand, has a building 40 feet tall. I'm actually repairing a waterfall that's 10 feet taller than this at Brookfield Zoo's Tropic World, which is home to monkeys, gorillas, and orangutans. Hey, good morning everybody. At the Pond Professor here. I am here today at Brookfield Zoo. We are doing some work on the Tropic World exhibit. So we're trying to repair a waterfall that was installed, gosh, probably almost 40 years ago at this point. Got all of our equipment, our tools in place, and now we're getting ready. We're gonna head out inside and we're gonna start our construction project. This is the main entry into Tropic World. Everything that is inside of this exhibit, you got South America, Asia, and Africa. The one that we are focusing on is going to be South America. So we're going to try to get that waterfall operational. Always love all the different signage and information that you could learn at these places. As a child, this was one of my favorite places to go to. We're going to be working all the way at the top of this building. Literally right under that roof, there is a skylight system, and that's where the waterfall starts out. So just a massive, massive structure. And when this building was built back in the 80s, it was a groundbreaking design to have mixed species together inside of one building. I'm at the top of Tropic World right now, as you can see. Got skylights and things above my head. Let me show you what I'm actually working on here. So here's this project that we're modifying. This tank was installed late 80s, I believe. So giant steel tank, water distribution manifold system over here, several outlets. What I think is interesting, it's actually kind of set up like one of our spillways right here. Check out our design. So we have a series of baffles inside of this. So as fast moving water comes in, it actually slows it down before it gets discharged out the front. It's exactly what they did here. So you have high velocity water coming in through these outlets right here, and then the water comes across and it hits these steel beams, which give the tank structural rigidity, just like it gave us rigidity here, but it slows the water velocity down. So what happens is water can go up above this slightly, but it also, the majority of the water goes underneath, and you can see another baffle down here. So the water kind of comes up and down, and it smooths and it gets rid of all the turbulence. You can also see where all the sediment and that type of stuff is being deposited, which is at the far end, because you have higher velocity water coming here, then it's going to settle material out, and then it overflows across this massive spillway. As you can tell, we are located at the very, very top of Tropic World right now. What's going to be happening is I'm going to remove all of these little diverter pieces that are going across, and then I'm coming in with a series of our spillways. So I have 4 over here. I'm going to take these large 4-inch pipes and I'm going to drop them down to 2-inch. We don't need that much water flow. They only operate at a very small percentage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop it down to 2-inch. Going to bring my piping and plumbing over. Then I'll have my series of spillways here. They will be locked in position. And then Rick here at the zoo is going to do a modified weir on the front of this to kick the water out a little bit further from the vertical wall, which you saw from down below. Check out this manifold. Giant, all Schedule 80, very expensive. So it was definitely built to last. It has been here for many, many years. This comes all the way up from the pump room, located all the way down on the bottom, which is 50 feet or below from where I'm currently standing. Comes through this manifold, the water slows down, and then you could adjust each individual outlet with these valves. When it was originally built, it was a groundbreaking project just because you are inside the exhibit. So you can see there's actually birds and things like that flying around inside of here. The purpose of this waterfall is actually to create a barrier for some of the primates that are located inside of this exhibit. They don't like water, so what the waterfall does is it actually acts as a gate or a barrier for them, and they're not going to come up to these upper areas, because as you can see, you have bird cages and other feeding areas and things like that up in this area. So they want to keep the animals in the exhibit themselves and not in some of the other perimeter type areas. So while the tank is draining, pulling these flanges apart, the valves and all that stuff are coming in pretty easily. Bolts are coming out, no problems. These fittings are not budging, so I have to cut them. And I'm gonna need to get some new flange parts. I cannot get that out of that socket. So I'm gonna get an entirely new Schedule 84-inch flange. You could either glue it or it could be threaded. I'm gonna reduce it down from 4-inch down to 2-inch, which is gonna then send the water over to our spillways, which will be located over here. So as soon as this is all drained down, I'll keep working on these. Then I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna pull all those little diverter pieces away, and then that will all give me a lot more flexibility with where I position those spillways going across. We're gonna have to anchor those down because the pump does not run all the time, so I don't want it to kind of wiggle around at all. We're gonna take the spillways, and then this little channel right here, we'll put a piece of metal strut going across the entire thing, and it'll lock all those in position. And I will also have tie downs that are gonna connect to these I-beams going across. So I'll come in with a series of U-clamps that will actually go over the PVC pipe, and then I'll use self-tapping screws and I'll screw it directly into that I-beam. So that'll lock everything in place. Just gonna keep everything from moving around, because the last thing we wanna have happen is have thousands and thousands of gallons of water that could actually go in a location where it's not supposed to. Now the good thing is they put a lot of safety precautions in place in case the tank leaks. They have a little bit of a wall, a secondary containment wall going around everything. And there also is a drain set up over here, which I'm currently pumping all this water into right now. Things are moving along kind of as expected. Projects like this, renovation projects, are always a little bit tedious, a little bit slow. Once you start getting into a rhythm though, everything will fall into place. Spillway section. Same exact setup, a couple of these valves, and then it's just going to overflow through this. Exactly the same setup as our spillway. It's not really set up for biological filtration. You do get some sedimentation coming out of here, but it's basically you're trying to slow the water velocity down with a series of baffles, and you could actually see all the people down below. So this is part of a giant system that acts as that barrier for the animals. Well, they clearly like the upper section here where they can get a better view of everything, but I think they are attracted to all the commotion and work that I'm doing up here as I cut pieces apart and unbolt all these components. All right, John and I are getting the new flanges taken care of. Remember, these were 4-to-4. So what we have is we have a 4-to-2 reducer. We have a small stub of rigid PVC. Then we have our coupling. The reason we did that is, unfortunately, these are shallow socket fittings. I don't like to glue into those with flex PVC. Can become a little sketchy. It might ride out on you. I like the deeper socket, which is better for the pressure. Even though we're not running a lot of pressure, I believe it creates a better overall bond for us. So we're gonna finish doing the 6 flanges like this. Then we'll start assembling everything and putting all the valves back together. Once we get the valves put back together, then we could start placing our 2-inch flex pipe going through these existing holes here, and then it's going to connect up to each of the individual spillways. Remember, I have 4 spillways over on this side. We have another 2 located on that back end. The other thing that John did when we first got here is he cleaned up all these gaskets. We want to make sure that we have a good solid seal between all these existing flanges as well as the new ones, because the last thing we want to have happen is a small leak. The nice thing about this, working at a zoo, they are used to dealing with all types of water issues. So as I mentioned yesterday, they have a secondary containment system that they installed using this block wall, and then they have drainage systems going underneath everything. So they protected themselves against any potential leaks, because you always have to be thinking of those things, especially when you start scaling up to a massive zoo system like we have here at Brookfield Zoo. And every single exhibit has some sort of a water feature, and I will show you what this one looks like. You can actually hear the rain outside. It's pouring rain out there, so perfect day to be working inside here. That's the water feature way down there. So we are 50 feet above the floor of the exhibit. But look at that drop all the way down to the bottom. So that waterfall that we're building over here, that spillway is located right on the other side, and it's going to be a sheer descent dropping all the way down. People actually could see it from that little viewing area as well as this bridge, but these waterfalls are designed as barriers. So as the water cascades down, it's going to keep the different primates from actually going to where people are going to be walking around, but it's also going to keep them from getting out potentially. So there's a lot of thought that has to go into these exhibits So it's really, really fun for us to be involved in an incredible renovation project like this. You could actually see there's these crossover areas where some of the animals will be able to go above and beyond and get outside of some of the areas where the actual people are going to be walking through the exhibit. So it just creates a completely different experience than actually viewing them through a cage type of an environment. All right, all the flanges are in. We have the reducers going down to 2-inch. We have the original metal structure. We're covering it up with a piece of the EPDM liner. It's gonna force all the water going over, so that's gonna wrap up the backside of the spillways just like on a normal waterfall. The reason we wanted to do that was just because I know a lot of the stuff has been compromised and we're trying to make sure that all the water is gonna go over the front of this. So our next step right now is gonna be to lay the spillways out, then we'll attach the bulkhead fittings, and then we'll have to hold the liner down in place. And then once that's done, we will come in and we'll connect all of our plumbing up to the appropriate spillways. And then this side will be done. We could move over to the second one. To shift gears a little bit. The original plan was to use some one-hole straps, drill through the I-beam, and then strap the pipe down to the top of it. That did not work. I broke 2 different drill bits and I melted 2 self-tapping screws. They just literally, they turned bright red and just fell apart. So this must be some sort of a hardened steel. So I cannot, barely get through it at all. What we did was just some of these angle iron clamps, and then I just have some of these connectors here for different types of conduits. This was 2-inch piping, so this kind of locked everything up. It's really, really solid, so I feel comfortable with that. The other nice thing about working with this flexible PVC, these elevations are all over the place. So this allowed me to come up nice and smooth and just kind of transition across, and then made up with the bulkhead fittings over here on these spillways. The other thing that I'm currently working on, visiting hours here over at the zoo, so a steady stream of people. I'm trying to be quiet, but it's next to impossible. So what I have here, I have some of the unistruts. I had to bolt directly to this existing piece of fiberglass. There's a series of threaded pieces that go inside of here. And then I have just a long 1/2-inch bolt right here, big giant machine screw that is going all the way through. And this is going to lock this down in position as well as keep it tight up against this. So as I draw this in, it's gonna snug all this stuff up and it's really gonna lock everything into place. I did put in some adhesive under here just to kind of lock the liner down while I was working. Once I'm done, I'll come in and I'll trim up all the rubber membrane. And then Rick is gonna come in after the fact and he's going to do some gunite work here on the front to kind of create a little bit of a lip kind of shooting out. So the challenge is, because these walls are very, very vertical, they had to come straight up just to get the elevation that they were looking for. The other reason that they came straight up was if it was tapered at all, it'd be easier for the monkeys to scale the wall, which they are currently doing, which is why we definitely need to get all this stuff in place. So we will have to get all that stuff taken care of. So as soon as I'm done with all this, we will test the pumps, make sure everything's flowing properly. We will have to make some modifications down in the basement. So the pump room is 50 feet down below me. Modify the pump to give us the desired flow rate that we're looking for. 12 to 16,000 gallons per hour of water flow coming through here. I'm just going to continue doing everything over on that side as well. All the brackets are on, valves are reinstalled, plumbing is in place, spillways are locked down with the strut. Next step is going to be for Rick and his team to finish up the front edge to get the desired waterfall effect pushing away from the face of the actual rock wall. So what they don't want to have happen is water kind of dribbling down the front. They want it to shoot out a little bit more, but there's a fine line, and that's because there is a bridge down below. Same setup over here, spillways, strut locking everything in place, and that is the bridge that we don't want to splash. So we want it to fall far enough away where it kind of falls right in between that little gap. It is a 50-foot drop. So the pump vault is actually right underneath this little structure over here, underneath that walkway. So we'll go down into the basement or the sub-basement, get everything operational, and hopefully be able to move on to the next project. We have water flow. This is perfect. So you can see we have the main fall over here. Beautiful cascade coming down. Little bit of splash over here, but it's not that bad. What I love about this design is you could bypass it by going around the back, or you can get a little bit of a splash on you over here. But it's just an incredible entry into this amazing exhibit. And that is a 50-foot tall waterfall. And then we have the secondary one over here. Remember, the whole purpose of these is to create a barrier to keep some of the monkeys from climbing themselves over and getting over here where they're not supposed to be. But we have Waterfall Spillways up on top. Everything is looking great. I know Rick and his team are going to come in and they're going to do some fake stonework right over that transition point where the rubber membrane's located. But right now I'm happy with everything. Piping, all of that looks good, and this was the ultimate test was coming down below.